Round of applause for Stan Deyo.
One of the things that came out talking to folks in the last few minutes, they'd say, look, I've followed your stuff for years and read this and that, and you feel kind of bad about this because, you know, I go to lectures too, just like you. I sit and listen to other folks on subjects, and we all do it. We tend to think, man, that guy just knows it all. But really, I could probably get about 15 of you that I've talked to, and except for stage fright, put you up here and let you talk about what you've studied in your particular aspect of what's going on, and you would teach us a lot. So understand that you're not a student and I'm a teacher. We are all students together in life, and we all learn from each other. I'm not a big business. I have normal real-world job. You know, I have my own business in computer consulting, and this is an avocation. The thing I do is my contribution to the social structure. And I think we must always remind ourselves of that, no matter who we're listening to, that they're just folks like us, whether it be a politician or a movie star or whatever it's going to be. So try to remember that, and if you see me wince when you say something like that, you'll know why, because I feel bad. In fact, even in the Bible, you know I'm a student of the Bible, that does tell you to call no man rabbi, meaning don't call anybody learned master and teacher of anything, because there has been only one according to the Bible, and that's where I come from. End of sermon. Now, yesterday I didn't get finished because I got long-winded, so I picked out some of the things that I wanted to talk about yesterday, the eyes out of it, as it were. I wanted to show you some footage taken from the NASA Space Shuttle mission STS-48. STS is for Space Transit or Transport System. We have been collecting data from a downlink over there, which is public access, not secured line. Other folks like yourself. Some of them do happen to work in associated companies and contractors for NASA in Houston, and they are friends of mine. However, some of the information we've got here is rather astounding. It's testing a new kind of camera, which, I mean, this kind of a camera is an image intensifier that uses a photo multiplier tube or chip, and it intensifies light in various frequencies as much as 10 to 20,000 times. So they use versions of this as night scopes in Vietnam so that they could see in the dark as though it were daylight. But what you're going to see here is extremely, extremely good. From 400 miles away, they're watching house lights over a city that is covered by cloud. In fact, you'll see some in New Zealand. Bruce brings up a point. I edited out the part where you're out in the backyard that day with the barbecue because they could see it all. He was on a node. Now, anyhow, I think you will be pleasantly surprised at the resolution of this camera, and the thunderstorm you will see from orbit is quite impressive. It was between Sydney and New Zealand when it was occurring, and I'll point it out as we get to it. But the thing that's really interesting about it is that there are some true UFOs, and not one but a lot of them, on this footage. And remember, this is coming down a public access. You monitor NASA's daily transmissions in the States on the dish. And they have on board the shuttle a little switch in several places, one up by the cargo bay door, that you can click like that. It's called the ground inhibit switch, and it just transfers to a coded line so that if something visual or audio comes over on your system going down the downlink that's open, it closes it to public access and codes it so that it can be explained later. I have 4 of the UFO sightings and filmings that were taken from that mission here. The 5th one is still being debated back in Houston with my friends at NASA. It is an extraordinary one, and I'm going to show you here one of these UFOs that traveled along the horizon at 17,000 kilometers an hour, stopped, took off that way at 65,000 kilometers an hour. Reasonably impressive. The number 5 one that I don't have yet, it's coming down, is better than that and more explicit. And as the tape comes down, there's a time coding that comes down with it, and so you can electronically tell where it was in the mission that this particular thing occurred. And so my friends went to the boys at Houston and said, look, we'd like to see your downlog tapes, this index number to this index number. Ah, look, sir, we don't have that. He said, well, I have it. You put it down to public access. Here it is. Said, we want you to explain this, because your astronaut just said, what was that? You say, reasonably explicit. And also summarized and paraphrased. They answered like this. Oh, well, probably water, ice crystals. Yeah. I said, well, do you mind if we show this to the public then, because I think you're lying? The guy backtracked very quickly, as I understand, and he says, no, look, let's get one thing straight. This is an SDI, a Strategic Defense Initiative test. And my friend says, oh, that's good. Okay, thank you very much. Walked out with it. Now, you've got to ask yourself, if that's an SDI test, what in the world were they flying? This is incredible. This is incredible. But they admitted that much. So they, being government employees and civilian employees in some case, are covering their jobs and doing what they're told to. But I'm certain, A, that they're definitely aware of it, and B, that our technology is beyond the blackbirds that we looked at yesterday at the Skunk Works. So let's have a look, if we can, at several fast UFOs in a lightning storm. With any good fortune. The wheels are moving. Are the lights going to dim for me over there? Thank you. See? Now, that light whipping across down there, a lot of these lights will be normal traffic. There's over 5,000 pieces of orbital stuff flying around different attitudes around the planet. This guy's up about 300 or 400 miles, as I recall. And the image intensifier is picking up other bits of orbiting debris or satellites, and you'll see them whipping across the screen. However, there are some that come zipping across that certainly are a lot faster than I would have thought they could be as a satellite at that altitude. But virtually all of these traces will go in a straight line. You will see them slow up a bit as they get across over toward the curve of the Earth going this way. So what you'll see here to begin with are certainly unidentified, but probably identifiable within the normal spectrum of understanding of orbital satellites. The ones we're going to look at just a few seconds down the way are things that we can't explain away easily.
Marcia, just be advised, we don't have some mode pictures to disk 6 that we'd like to get down sometime tonight.
This is looking out the rear end over the open cargo bay toward the tail on the left. He has two cameras going, that one plus the one out the window.
Mark, how many additional images do you need to send?
I think the disk total is somewhere about 35 minutes.
Okay.
And first 3 images requested is now coming down.
Thank you.
Now he's rewinding his tape, or his disc. It's actually a digital disc. What he's going to do here is do a freeze frame dump on a particular view. We've got some traffic down the lower left-hand corner. Now the computer processor kicked out the tail because it was so high. He's now enlarged digitally that little dot we saw down there. Okay, now we'll look at some more fast UFOs. There's a rather fuzzy fat one on the right. And about the center of the screen in some of these shots, you will see like little fireflies, and this is a byproduct of the photomultiplier chip, just intensifying transient electromagnetic light sources. That one's fairly well moving on at that enlargement. Now we'll run down and look at the lightning storms over the ocean between New Zealand and Sydney. And this is where we'll pick up the fastest sighting that changes direction. Okay, those flashes are lightning storms. Now, when you see it, you will see a light on the horizon come down to here, disappear beneath the clouds, and almost the exact second it does, over here, a light will pop out of the clouds the same size, and will move up to here at 17,000 Ks, stop momentarily. There will be an optical flash on the screen over here, and it will zip out over here at 65,000 kilometers an hour. In your lower left is New Zealand, the light source center.
Just a heads up, we're heading off the nose, may get some radicom.
Okay, Jeff, thanks.
And look at that light over there on the left horizon. Here he comes. Now watch him disappear into the clouds just next to that bright spot there. He's beneath the atmospheric envelope now. There he comes over on the right. There he goes. There he goes. You can still see him heading for that bright star out there. Just past it. And now we can just barely see it. He's gone. Now let's look at the general situation. Suppose that what they're all saying, with the exception of whether it's Majestic 12 or Majority 12, suppose that what they're all saying is true. We have not one, but several groups of alien beings on the planet, somewhere or in several locations, interacting with mankind, some benevolently and some malevolently. Why would the governments cover this up? You have, if you've got a treaty, as some of the speakers say, if you've got a treaty with these beings, they've got super technology, why don't you just go ahead and say, well, look guys, you've seen V, you've seen Battlestar Galactica, you've seen E.T., well, they really are here, and they're not quite that bad. They're really kind of nice, except they eat people. I'm being frivolous, obviously, but I can't understand the need for the secrecy for so long. In the beginning, yes, to check them out, to source out where they're coming from. The thing bothers me. I was approached by Dr. Maxfield, who was Teller's associate in Lawrence Livermore Radiation Labs, the same Dr. Teller mentioned on this tape. And he does get cranky. I must underline that occasionally. At home, at my home in Dallas, I had been working with another friend, an electronics fellow, on toroidal coils even back in the late 60s. And somehow Maxfield found out about details of my work that I had only shared with this guy. I mean, he could have picked his brain, but he didn't seem to believe it. Didn't even know Maxfield. But anyway, I always called into Maxfield's office, whom I'd never met, in Dallas, and in a private conference where he told me all the thoughts I even had about gravity, anti-gravity, magnetism, interaction between the various waveforms of this, etc., and the craft. And he said, look, don't play games with me. He said, tell me what you're doing. I said, well, I'm looking on new kinds of physics, and here I am talking to a guy that's got that many degrees and stuff, and is cleared to National Security Agency. You know, what do you say to a guy like that? It's like talking to local God, you know, in physics anyway. And he just interrupts me and says, okay, skip all that. Look, let's talk man to man. UFOs, anti-gravity, that's what you're doing really, isn't it? And I said, well, yes, sir. And he said, right. Let's finish your work down in Australia. There was a man I met face to face that is very powerful in my country, and his partner or his associate, Dr. Teller, is still very powerful, talking about 50 projects that Dr. Teller had been in charge of developing flying discs in the United States since the mid-50s. As time passed, I did get down here. It was a quite involved trip to get down here in one piece, but when I did get down here, again through rather involved processes in Melbourne, I nearly ended up at the bottom of a mine shaft, dead in Ballarat. again, these chaps that I'm supposed to be getting along with and doing work for were responsible. So after I survived that, I started to do a lot more research on where these guys were coming from. And I found that in 1958, researching this, by the way, in a library in Adelaide and one in Melbourne, in the electrical engineering journals, I looked at papers being published on things on anti-gravity, on electric propulsion systems, on electrogravitic propulsion and concepts. And before May of 1958, for several years before that, there were up to probably about 100 companies, universities in various nations openly publishing, and look what we have found. If you do this to barium, you energize it while it's cooling, it weighs 60% less when it's cool. It's called barycenter or contragravitational weighting or wafting to the metal. I was impressed. I was impressed with their openness and frankness about what they were doing. All these people. May 1958, the journals don't publish anymore. Not just one country, but all of the people I was trying to chase up and continue and see what they published the next year stopped May 1958. And this wasn't just America, or just Japan, or just Australia. It was all of them. So either there was an unannounced treaty between all of these countries, including Russia, which said, okay, guys, it's May 1958. We don't tell them anymore. It's secret. Or there was some other stronger authority that stepped in and took over everyone's project at once, a more advanced technology. This is around the time, just a little bit after the Roswell incident, the crash in Arizona. And I'm convinced that did happen to myself, having met one of the young chaps whose father was involved in the pickup as a youth in Texas. In Texas, in Dallas, where I lived, we were right next to Fort Worth, which is where the plane landed after it got back from Roswell. What I am not understanding is why we've continued to develop new technology like this under the guidance of these powerful people, whether they're aliens or other governments. I have met with intelligence agents in British and American and Japanese and Australian intelligence over the last 15 years. They approached me more than me them. And they have been able to tell me things that I've been able to verify, their credentials in some cases, and the information and technology in other cases. They, as a group, have fairly well made it evident that after World War II, 4 or 5 research facilities to develop flying discs and attendant-related technologies were set up in Norway on the Norwegian side of the border with Russia, in West Germany, in one of the great bunkers, actually, that was not destroyed underground. In Saudi Arabia, near the Rub Khali, the empty quarter of the desert at 120 miles southeast of the Jabal Tawak mountain range, in Australia, and in South Africa. In these facilities, men would arrive periodically, usually young men, slender build, darkish suits with a briefcase, very thin, and then there would be blueprints and instructions, not how to research a concept, but how to develop Earth-based industry and technology to manufacture what was in the blueprint. One intelligence agent, probably the meanest of the lot I met, said, look, I don't know who sent the papers. For all I know, it could have been aliens. I said, was it? And he said, well, I don't know. I just work there. They were to, in essence, back engineer, as Lazar is saying, all this new technology. So I suspect that this shutdown was related to this group that had the guys with the black briefcases coming around dropping these packages on the research facilities. Now, I've known for some time, for probably 15 or 16 years, that Pine Gap here employed Germans, Yugoslavians, Australians, a couple of other nationalities. Australians were never allowed into the central area A, area C, the outer area anyway, is where the Australians were kept. Their clearances were never cleared high enough to get into area A. Virtually you had to be born there to get in area A. Pine Gap, I must also reiterate, what people demonstrate against and go climbing over fences with placards about is a movie set. If you just think about it, if you were going to build a very sensitive and very vulnerable detection system, not saying any other things, just a nuclear monitoring detection and Kuwait and Iraq watching system, you would not set it above ground where a nuclear detonation could certainly damage your transmission. You would put it below ground and away from that spot considerably in an area that has no signs and no obvious occupation. In some cases, you might even pick a large body of water to disguise the thermal emissions from the system underneath the waterbed, because it diffuses it and it's hard to pick up from satellite. So, flying saucers, UFOs, and little people. I think they are here. I think we have had them in a form like us since the beginning of man in ancient days. I've studied older records back, 7,000 or 8,000 years old, as far as we can estimate in some cases, and tried to make heads or tails of the languages and the ciphers involved, some of them from India, trying to understand how we relate these old philosophies to what we're seeing today. And in my opinion, just my opinion, the most readily accessible and readily readable old writing in Paleo-Hebrew is the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. There are some other books older which are not recognized by the Catholic or the Protestant churches, which I've accessed, and some scrolls that we have had tracings of to read from, and some clay tablets that we've had tracings of to read from. Compiling all these together, I still find that the Mosaic account, even as summarized as it is, gives us a very good clue, which agrees with the steles in Egypt and the Suez about the sons of God that landed there, and the Greek accounts of the same thing from the city of Clysma, which is now called the port of Suez. In Genesis, in Hebrew, in Bereshis, or Genesis 6 in the Old Testament, first book, there is a few short paragraphs talking about and the Nephilim were in the earth in those days, and the sons of God came down, and they saw that the daughters of man were fair, and took them to wife, and had children by them. And the offspring of these unions were heroes of ancient legend. That's in English. In Hebrew, the Nephilim, only mentioned twice in the old writings that we can find, means something as close as we can translate, any of us, even the rabbis that I work with on it. The big people who were cast down from a high height, whose countenance and power was terrible and frightening, and they were cast down to the earth. One rabbinical commentator who's been dead a number of years suggested they may have been the dinosaurs, big and terrible mighty beasts. Within context with the same thing in the same paragraph where they're talking about the sons of God coming down, I don't think so. They use different words for the sons of God, B'nai Elohim, as opposed to Nephilim. The sons of God were not of earth. They come down and they mate with human beings who must be close to them genetically, and the offspring becomes not heroes. Well, I guess you could call them heroes. Yes, the lead characters of the ancient legends, Hercules, Thor, many of the Greek and Roman, and hence Roman legends of the gods of the ancient time with superpowers derive from these discussions. The rabbinic commentaries, the Midrash, various things say these beings could not procreate. They were sterile, mules, and so they died out and there was no more of them. In the Platonic, from Plato, in the Plato account, which he derived from the learned priests of Suez in Egypt in 650 to 680 BC, somewhere in that region, I think, or 623, I forget the date. Plato says, the sons of God came to earth, and they were allocated by the father of the gods different sections of the earth that were theirs. You're most probably familiar with the legend of Atlantis, which I've written about in the Vindicator Scrolls. In fact, what I'm telling you now is coming out of that. Atlantis was the area allocated to one of the sons of God called Poseidon in the Greek tongue. Remember, this is coming through 3 translations. It's coming from clay tablets that came out of the Mesopotamian Babylonian valley into Egypt. So it had to be translated from the cuneiform most probably, then into the Egyptian hieroglyph, and then into the Greek alphabet, which is a derivative of Hebrew. The Hebrew and Greek and Sumerian languages in the Mesopotamian valley in that region are all derived from one single language. The writing is totally different, but the pronunciation is extremely similar. Hindu, even though the writing is different, is almost a direct transliteration of Hebrew. This is the most common denominator language I could find to study these sons of God. I would not have taken on a project of finding Atlantis ordinarily, because I write it off as one of those nice mythical things that's been gone so long that we could never track it. The clues are gone. But I was wrong. And fortuitously, if you wish, I was led to look in the Reader's Digest book of Unsolved Mysteries. My wife gave it to me as I finished writing the first part of the book. Said, "You've got to see this." I said, "No, not really. I don't want to do anything else." And so I sat down and read it in the evening there, and I was amazed at the number of things I thought I could answer as far as the clues. So I got the most critical translation, Jowett's translation of Plato's works, because he didn't believe Atlantis existed at all. And I figured if I can make it work with this guy's translation, then it's right. I approached the Cousteau Foundation after I had solved the mystery and had the maps and found out where Atlantis was and is today. And it took about 20 to 30 minutes before they finally stood up at the table and cracked a bottle of bubbly and said, "You're right. We were wrong 20 years ago. We went the wrong direction. We agree with everything." And we were making plans about how we would get the $15 million to take Calypso into the Persian Gulf to find the sunken part of the Atlantis, the capital island, Poseidon. Its location was and is the second island. If you're looking into the Persian Gulf like this, and this is Baghdad up here, and this is Basra here. Then there's a little island off the coast of Kuwait, and then one more, and then the Berry oil fields right next to this one here. This second island here is called Abu Ali, and it looks like a volcanic cone, but it's not. It's called salt diapir, and there are about 180 of them in this area. They're an intrusion of a salt formation that pushes up and forms a sandstone and a limestone dome over it, a big smooth mountain. And over the course of events, due to whatever causes, there's wear and tear on the underlying strata, and the cone sinks into the middle, and you have a little island in the center and a ring around it. In this case, the ring around Abu Ali has very, very old structures, stone structures buried into the mud. And so we were heading that way. And a man named Saddam Hussein stopped that. I would hate to have been there when it started. As a result, the very island that we want to image with the naval radar, the depth sounders and stuff that go about 100 feet into the rock or the mud, that very island is almost totally inaccessible because of the mines they put into it. They put some very cheap sleeper bubble mines in there, which you just drive over and it picks up your prop line or something, and it blows up, and all it does is send a big bubble of air up underneath amidships and jams all your drive shafts for your props, and possibly breaks the hull and breaches it just from a bubble of air underneath you. And we couldn't take the risk to take crews in there. It cost about $3 million a month to dive in the area, even knowing basically where we wanted to go. So we've not been able to go in as yet and prove that capital location of Atlantis. But the reason Atlantis is important is that it was founded in their legends, in the Egyptian legends and Greek legends, by sons of God. One of them in his area, Poseidon, came down and saw a girl named Clifton, an earth girl. He married her, and they had 5 sets of male twins who became the 10 twin kings of the territory of Poseidon, which was later to be called Atlantis after Atlan, Atlas, the oldest of the sons. Many names similar to these, in fact almost direct portions, like the territories around them, the ancient bordering territories, were given by Plato, and in his time Israel had been in existence for about 1,000 years, 900 to 1,000 years, and Israel boarded up onto the rest of Atlantis. Atlantis was and is today all of Saudi Arabia, all of the Oman, Yemen, the whole Saudi Arabian plate, all the way up to the Jordan River. The Pillars of Hercules were not the mountains at the or the Straits of Magellan going in from the Mediterranean into the Atlantic. The mistake is easy to make because there was two of them. But the Pillars of Hercules, or Hercules in the Roman, were never said to be two. They were plural, but not the two. The legend of Heracles is as a very strong man, a big man. Some of the gods were giants. In southern Lebanon, over the last 15 years, skeletons of beings 10 feet tall have been unearthed in what the local legends call the Valley of the Giants. In the Exodus account in the Old Testament, Moses tells about sending a few of his scouts ahead after they get out of Egypt. They're going into the Promised Land. The scouts come back and they're wide-eyed and say, man, we're not going over there. There are big guys there, giants. And they were frightened. So Moses then decided, well, you're chicken. It's going to be a long time before you get there, chum. And he takes them for a 40-year wander in the desert before he lets them cross over the Jordan north of that position 40 years later and still encounter giants and went against them. The last well-recorded case of a giant who slept in a bed made of iron was a king up in southern Syria region today. He commanded 60 cities, and his name was Og. In fact, in Rome, they have a god that they call Ogmios, Ogmios, which was named after him. They made him a god, a deity in their pantheon, as it was. His bed was 18 feet long, steel, or iron rather, to support him. He was a giant, and the last of the giants to die. He died in 1450 BC. Footprints of large hominids, which would indicate a height of 10 to 11 feet, have been found fossilized in stone in the United States. These things are readily available, even photographs from various agencies and documentation. The Creation Science Research Group in California, I think you have one here in Queensland, have some of that material. I have seen it in their publications as well. These beings are bigger and better than we are in a lot of respects, or were and are. In the Mesopotamian Valley, in the middle of Saudi Arabia, if you wish, on the border to Iraq, or in Iraq itself, archaeological studies in the area for years have maintained something unusual happened to this cradle of modern city-dwelling beings. They all seem to agree at the moment that life of the hominid being as we know it, in whatever system, whether you be creationist or evolutionist, that life started in the Omo Valley region of Ethiopia, which is where we have been able to track the legend of the Garden of Eden into the Danakil Plains, just 50 to 60 kilometers off that valley. The migration of the tribes was as hunter-gatherers, like aboriginals that go and don't plant and don't shepherd. They go and they take what's on the land, the trees, the animals, during the time of the year it occurs, and eat it. These are called hunter-gatherers. And the archaeologists have found that in that area, the hunter-gatherers, in one generation, something happened. They were hunting and gathering just like normal, and suddenly their technological curve jumped one great step. They had cities, they had plumbing, they had metal alloying, and there are electric batteries in the Baghdad Museum, about 100 of them, clay batteries that were lit, clay, iron and copper, and acetic acid, or fruit acid, citrus acid batteries. This, again, in my opinion, gives credence to the interaction between a superculture and us. I don't think this was the plan of the father of the gods, as the Greek calls it, from what the rest of the Plato account says, and from what the Torah says about this. But again, after a certain point, it becomes subjective. Now, the issue we're talking here all started with us discussing what happens if they really are here. Now, ask yourself this. If aliens are really here and they've interacted with us on this basis in the past, and they've got technology just light years ahead of us, we would be like children in a playpen next to a guy that can drive jets and airplanes and stuff. I mean, we're just novices. No real threat, really. Why then are Lazar, Cooper, Moore, in fact, Cooper's backing off the position, but why are Moore, Frieden, all these telling us they're here, it's been a cover-up? Why are they saying things that basically are trying to get us to rise up against our governments, our established orders, and say, these guys are hiding something from us. They are guilty of keeping the truth from us. I'm not saying they're not. They probably are. But the way this stuff is being announced, and the 95% truth and the 5% bull dust, whatever, the way it is being presented, if you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, what do I feel? I feel anger and frustration, you say, because I don't know what the truth is. Is that a fair assessment? I say the same thing. If they're not here, why are these people doing this? I mean, you might say, all right, Bob Lazar is rumored to get money for his life story, but he's only one of a lot of them. Stanton Friedman is a nuclear physicist, well-known, worked for Westinghouse and General Electric, devising, 4-megawatt ion thrust engines for deep space. I've met him. I like the guy. Why is he doing this? He's not making any money out of it. He's not selling any books. I think they're here. But I think there's more to they than just one group. Simply put, good guys and bad guys. The Indian records in the Asian Indian country, the Indian records indicate two, the black guys and the white guys. The Hebrew records even say it, the sons of darkness and the sons of light. And a battle has occurred and is occurring according to both of these legend groups. If you were to get really organized and demand to know things, you could bond together, you could march, you could sign petitions, and you would get a little press or a little video in your town. You might even get 40 or 50,000 people together, whether it be a gun lobby issue or whether it be an ID card issue. And for a day or two or a week, people would be saying, wow, we did something. We got together and we waved our signs at them. And then it would be forgotten. There'd be something else on TV or some other thing to entertain, and you'll do it just like me, and you'll forget. And you go on to the next thing until something irritates you about the situation, the frustration builds up, and you go down the street. We're quite happy to let you do that. The government says, do it. Just don't break any windows or mess up the lawn while you're doing it. How do we take a rational approach to getting this answer? Do we have the authority or the power to do this? Believe it or not, I think all of this prophecy business ties in with the UFO problems we're addressing. I was chatting with some people during the break. Were asking me about our travels in the Middle East and exploring in the Dead Sea region with Dr. Jones, the role model for the Indiana Jones series in Hollywood. And I mentioned to them that the Middle East, the people there like to equate things that occur or are going to occur or kingdoms to beasts and plants and various natural phenomena to help them remember them. While I was in one of the caves there with a guy here from Sydney, actually, we were two guys. We were exploring a number of caves. There were 400 of them there. Quite a few to get into, but anyway, we took in a couple, and it was during the day, and one of the chaps and I went ahead of the other guy and into this cave, fairly, reasonable opening size in it, and we dived into it, and we noticed immediately that the cave was musty and warm and moist inside, and all the other caves were dry and dusty and kind of dry and if anything, a little bit cool. So it must be some old instinct way down the back of the hair in your neck or something. You get in there and you walk a few steps, and we did a few steps more, and we could see well. There was no problem. There was adequate light from our torches. We got about as far in as halfway down the back of this hall here, and I turned to him and I said, look, I hate to say this, but I think there's something else in here with us. He said, I hate to say it, but look at this bone I just stepped on. And there's this great big thigh bone like this gnawed down freshly. And I said, well, bye. Boom. And we got a lecture from the locals about the cats that live in these things that do devour livestock and folks occasionally. The Middle East, the cats, the big cats, are called by various names, but it relates to a beast or a wild, terrible, ripping beast, the names they use. For a number of reasons, I'm certainly willing to say that I could be wrong in my conclusions at this point, in looking at biblical prophecy, looking at Middle East customs, and the current world petroleum and energy war that's going on. I see this happening. Now, for those of you that are familiar with biblical prophecy and things like that, you try to second guess where I'm going. On the west, we have the United States, we have Europe, we have South America, most of that. We have some other dotted Western Roman Catholic, Protestant, Jewish-type nations bonded together in what is a major economic consuming block and manufacturing block. As I said yesterday, over 85% of our energy resources of the planet are consumed by less than 28% of the population of the world that you and I live in, where we have all the modern cons and industrial complexes, and we're thoroughly spoiled. Well, the great majority of the planet does good to eat every day, once anyway. Now, this Western society has the technology. It is advanced in everything. Right now on the planet, discounting aliens, they are the most advanced group on the planet. You and I live in this group. Because of that, they control, at this point in time, or appear to control, the global banking system. Now, I've talked about it years ago, people before me before that, and people after I've talked about it, and I'm sure most of you are aware of the term of the Illuminati, the conspiracy. And I used to think, and they used to think, the Illuminati, I'm sure, that they were going to control an entire planet and bring it into order and solve mankind's problems eventually. But in reality, what I see today is the Illuminati, this learned group of bankers, philosophers, scientists, etc., live in the Western world, the Western alliance, if you wish, where you and I live. And this consortium is now having to confront the Chinese bloc, the Asian Muslim bloc, and the Middle East Muslim bloc as entities apart from their plan. Even though they've included them, some wild cards are occurring. Natural disasters, political assassinations, things that were not predicted in their global acquisition model. Now, they are encountering a very strong and consolidated Arab Islam bloc, led by the Shia movement, which is a small percentage of the Muslim world, headquartered or centered in the Persian southern sector of Iran. And just because there's not been a lot of things in the news about Iran and the United States throwing slings off at each other, do not think that this Iranian-American conflict is over by any stretch of the imagination. The Iraqi issue was a little side thing. It was using Saddam as a whipping boy for what was going on in the Middle East and as a lesson to Iran without a direct conflict. With the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the arms and various other things coming down now into the influence and possibly direct control of Iran through Azerbaijan and the southern Georgian provinces, we now see a wild, very angry group of Arabs saying, we've had enough of the economic West trying to right us. So I see the United States and the United States of Europe and the United Kingdom, all of us have been working together in concert to A, keep atomic power out of the hands of the Arab bloc and the Asian bloc if we could, and B, to control the Arabs so that we can get their resources and to control their money so that even though we buy the oil, they can't use the money as we want. And the Jonathan May story, some of you may be familiar with it, is a man who attempted, and I think did so successfully, to blow the whistle on an American banking transaction, or a series of them, that took a lot of Arab money and invested it for the Arabs that they were holding it for without telling them the dangers in third world economies as World Bank type loans. The sad part about it was that these third world economies were known to be unstable and never able to repay their debt, and they went bankrupt. And the Arab money was gone and not insured. And the Western banks said, oh, gee, that's sad. Well, now, if you were the Arabs, wouldn't you get irritated? I'm not saying I'm pro-Arab or pro-American. I'm just looking at both sides. Now, the Yanks, for their own, or the Western Alliance, for their own reasons, have done many things that were not exactly kosher. And the Arabs, believe it, have done a lot of things that weren't exactly kosher. So whether one is wrong and the other is right doesn't matter. We have over here on the Western Alliance, we have a technological cowboy trying to ride a wild beast over here in the Middle East that's darn tired of being sat on. Now then, the beast has got horns, little missiles and things over there in Georgia. And he's going to turn and he's going to throw the rider and stomp him to pieces, if prophecy can be interpreted this way. Why do I say that? In the book of Revelation, not far after where we're talking about the mark, it talks about another code, symbolism for the world in this age in which we find ourselves. Now just compare. Suppose it is correct. Here's what it says. And a whore, a woman of ill repute, dressed in robes of scarlet and purple, is seen to be riding on the back of a beast. And on this woman's forehead is the sign written, Mystery, Babylon, Confusion. Now, who does this represent? Does it mean literal Babylon? I ask you, does it mean that? Or is this beast is trying to steer the the Arab alliance? And is this woman in the scarlet robes, who is drunk with the blood of the saints, it says, is this the Roman Catholic Protestant ethic that is the Western world? And here, I'm not attacking the Roman Catholic Church or the Protestant Church. I'm simply telling you, is this what the symbolism is talking about? If it is, then further down in the scripture it says, and the beast shall turn upon the woman and devour the flesh from her bones until she is gone. Now, bones can be healed in prophecy, and it can be revived into a living thing again. Now, if this is correct, and if you accept that as an axiom, that this prophecy will come true, and it relates to the event we're talking about now, then we're in for a rather difficult time. Now, step for a moment out of the prophecy type and guesswork line and step over here and say, let's look at politics and money and current situations. Do we have a Balkan powder keg in the Middle East? Are the Arabs angry at the moment? Does anybody disagree? They don't have to say whether they're justified, but are they angry? Yes, they're angry. Is the United States, is Europe being cautious? Are they all involved in making a peace treaty in the Middle East between Israel, the linchpin, and the Western Alliance and the Arabs? The answer to all of those is yes, they are. And if you want to see yourself here or in the other countries that we're talking to on this network tape, get onto the CompuServe computer network. It's a global network. You can tie into that for $10 a month on the Executive News Scan service. We do it all the time, every day. We scan 7,000 stories a day, all over the world. The computer does it, pulls it off. At the end of the week, I get my stories down that I'm interested in. I put a keyword search in it. You can do the same. My keyword searches run something like UFO, earthquake, solar phenomena, Israel, peace talks, Middle East, Arab, Gaddafi, a few other little names I put in. Of these 7,000 stories, any story that has anything to do with any of those subjects of that keyword is pulled off and put in my electronic mail, and I pull it down to my printer and read it. In fact, on the way over, I read 75,000 characters on the plane of the latest updates on earthquakes occurring and on the Middle East peace negotiations. The ink is just now drying in that new cosmic conspiracy you've got. And Israel, like I said yesterday, is making, it's got a delegation meeting with China to do exactly as I would have done if I were them, to sell them or trade them the potash and the Dead Sea fertilizer for goods and services out and protection out of China. A temporary measure. Again, I say this is because Israel is not finding America a total ally any longer. America is a democracy, and there are a lot of people that feel that we shouldn't be involved in the Middle East anymore. We've got problems at home type things. Whether that's right or wrong, that's the situation, and they're withdrawing a lot of aid that had been promised to Israel. So Israel is the Balkan powder kegs. Whether you're pro-Israel or not, I tell you this, that little tiny piece of real estate is the key to whether we have a very comfortable future to finish this generation. And you don't have to be a prophet to see this. Just read the news. A lot of the stories that, in fact, majority of them that you would get off of this CompuServe computer network, you're not going to see in your local newspapers. Why? I don't think it's totally suppressed news. It's just that there's so much of it, and it's really not too much interest to people here. I mean, like most people want to read local news, that they don't put it in. They use the space for advertising or something else. So what I'm saying is not that it's a conspiracy to keep it away from you. It's freely available. Just tie in and look at these things. You would be astounded what comes down the news network. I would also encourage you to, those of you who are really, really interested in trying to get to the bottom of these things and believe that some of the old writings may be correct, as I do, to don't trust just any translation or English or whatever. Go to the Hebrew and to the Greek yourself. The Hebrew particularly because it's so old that it's virtually impossible that somebody of our modern last 1,000 years has screwed it up. Now, I've had so many people, I'm sure you have, knock on my door and corner me and say, this is what you've got to believe, or you're going to zap, or you're going to turn into this. And look, I say to them, well, you may be right. And in the end, I look in the mirror and I say, well, if I am missing the truth, it's my fault. Where do these guys get their information from? The majority of them get it from the same books, but in English. So I went back to the Hebrew, and it took 2 weeks to learn how to read the Hebrew letters. And this is not anything exceptional. You can do it. You write to Behrman House, Behrmann House. I think I have it in the Vindicator Scrolls in the credits to show you where to go, in New York. And they're just a book-selling place for education. And they have 2 little books about that thick and that thin like that are self-teach for primary school people how to read the Hebrew letters. This is an aleph, say aleph, aleph. This is a bet, now write a bet. The aleph bet. It's that simple. Do not be frightened. And with that, I bought a rather thick book where the learned gentleman of a number of different disciplines, primarily interested in Hebrew and Chaldean and Arabic, had compiled all possible combinations and all possible parts of the Hebrew words that you're going to find in the old scrolls anywhere. And that's called a lexicon. There are good ones and bad ones, or efficient ones and non-efficient ones. But this allows you to not even know the grammar rules for the Hebrew. I encourage that, but it allows you not to even know that, to pick up a Hebrew written text, which I'll show you what it looks like in a second, and to say, oh, that word is in Hebrew something like, dog. Right. Now, dog over here, duh, and you go over and you look in the D. It allows you to look up in the Hebrew and then see the English parts of that word. Now, if I say to you, a midsummer night, midsummer, well, you know what that is, middle of the summer. Midsummer is all one word. In the Hebrew, it's like that. You have mid. You take the first part of the word and say mid. What does that mean? In between 2 points. It's in the center of summer. That is one of the 4 seasons, and so that word means in the between of this long season, and you start to build up a cultural understanding of that one word. Now here's where the problem has come in, and why you haven't gotten what is written in that book to the extent of it. If you like UFO stories and alien stories, you're missing the best book you've ever seen in your life. I'm going to tell you some of the things we've found that we haven't had time to write about yet, and we're going over to look at the site shortly. When you try to tell somebody in another language something from your culture, if you live concurrently in the same time period, the same century, you could say to somebody, look, I saw this house. It was in a red light zone over in the King's Cross, you know. And you could go wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and they say, oh, yeah, one of those. Yeah, right. You might understand, and a Spanish-speaking person, you might be able to communicate that to in broken English, and he'd say, oh, yes, I know those houses of ill repute. 500, 1,000 years from now, they dig up the ashes of Sydney, and they look at this letter you wrote to your mate that said, hey, I caught him over in a red lighthouse in the other side of town. A red lighthouse. Ah, was it one of the ship warning systems? I read one. Do you see the problems that can occur? Because for you and I, well, it's obvious. It's part of our culture. And this is what has happened in the Hebrew to English translations. A lot of people try to make it like a conspiracy that somebody's changed the Bible to hold the truth back. Maybe so. But by far, the weight of the problem, and I've talked to many of the translators of these books, is they're trying to agree on the cultural meaning of these words. Something as simple as the crossing of the Red Sea. You've all heard this. You've watched the Cecil B. DeMille's movie. A column of fire by day, by night, a column of smoke by day. The voice of God speaks, and it moves and parts the water of the Red Sea, and Israel walks across it. Simple. Goes over and sits at the base of Mount Sinai, and God talks to Moses, and they get the 10 Commandments. That's very straightforward. But it's dull and listless compared to what it says. They crossed not the Red Sea, but a tributary arm of it, or the length that's now called the Suez Canal. They crossed it near the port of Suez on the Suez link on the Red Sea side. In Hebrew, it never, ever said the Red Sea, not even close. It said the Sea of Reeds, R-E-E-D-S. Why did it say this, we asked. And my friends, there are about 8 or 9 of us that study Hebrew and go treasure hunting for old cities and lost civilizations and this kind of stuff. And we found an amazing thing. Reeds, encyclopedia, genus, many, species, many. Some of the genus of these, one of them is called typhon. In the Hebrew, the word for one of the sites, or the portion of the site where they were crossing, a landmark, was called the landmark of Siphon, T-Z, Siphon. So I looked up Siphon, city of. Ancient name for Greek city, Klizma, now today called Suez. Why did the Greeks call it Klizma? Klizma is a Greek word meaning a spiral of water as though it were an enema injection spinning up. Typhon, the reed, is a hollow reed with a hole up the middle. This sector of that part of the Suez, up there before you enter the canal, has a landform that's a cove like this. And in that landform, horrific tornadic and cyclonic storms, water spouts occur and just suck the water up like an enema. In the Hebrew, without going into all the details of them leaving in the Goshen area and coming down to get to that point, they get to the edge. As you know in the story, Pharaoh and his troops are right there fixing to wipe out all of Israel on the edge of this sea crossing, this little narrow channel crossing. And it says, and God causes this barrier to come down between them so that neither the Egyptians nor the Israelites during the night that passed could get at each other and do any damage to each other. So neither side could get to the other one. And on the Israeli side, toward the water, it glowed, and God provided a light for them inside of this wall. And at the same time, it says, here's, let's call that the crossing point, and here are the Egyptians over here, and here's Israel here. Now there's this wall between them. This side of it glows, and it is lit by night so they can get things ready. This is water, we'll make that water. The Israelites report from this direction, which would have been basically somewhat east, that there was an easterly breeze, or not a breeze, a wind, a dry wind that blew all night and dried out the crossing point and spread the water. And you think, well, why didn't it just blow them away if it was that tough to pile up water? And we ask all these kind of questions. The answers are all there in every Hebrew word. There's not a wasted word there. Not a wasted word. This wall did this. It was a circle. They were sitting in the eye of a cyclonic tube. Remember it said a funnel in the English? They didn't lie. It was a funnel. They just, you and I assume, little willy-willy. They were in the eye of it. And you say, oh, they would have been sucked up. Wrong. Wrong. We've had 2 people survive this in the United States and tell us what happens when a tornado drops on top of you. And here's the guy down here in the United States, farmer out here on the dirt. This big funnel drops out of a cloud right on top of him. Mind you, the funnel was hundreds of meters wide. And he thought it was over, and suddenly he realized that coming down on top of him was warm, moist air. Smooth, gentle. And he couldn't believe his fortune. He looked up inside the funnel. This is documented in your libraries here. I got it out of the libraries here in Melbourne. And there were circular rings and sparks and arcs and glows up inside this thing from the friction and the static charges inside that spinning air. And he was getting, like flickering fluorescent light down in the paddocks out in the farm. Just as suddenly, it lifted up and dived over somewhere else. If it hadn't have done that, if the border of it had crossed him, if you look down onto a tornado path from the air, they have a characteristic signature. They rip up like a razor blade in a very narrow path that's circular. They rip up the ground. Here's what happens. The air comes down, hits the ground, bounces up, and spirals back around. There's a zone in between these two, and so in cross-section you have the air coming down, you'd have the null zone in here, and you'd have the traverse going back up this way. Think about it. Every tornado you've seen photographed with sucking up things, the vacuum, it didn't suck it up here. You saw logs sticking out of here, tree trunks, bits and pieces sticking out the side, and not sucked in, hanging out there on the side. Now think about it. If there were a vacuum up the center, it would suck it up and be gone. The vacuum is in the wall here. High-speed air, Venturi effect, Bernoulli effect. This dropped on to an entire country of 1 million people and all their livestock during the night, at the beginning of the night. And they were in the eye of this thing, which spanned clear across that crossing point. Well, we studied on, and we found a number of things that occurred that certainly were miraculous. And this was intelligently controlled, I must tell you, because it didn't stop here. It went over dry land and it stayed with them for a long time. Days, months. This thing banked the water up during the night until you had a bank of water here and little eddies around the corner that couldn't come by gravity. They'd fall back in, and there were eddy pools back here. So, actually, they would have been out here. I like to draw these curls, you see. And Israel is in the middle of this. Okay, and Egypt sees them start to leave. Now remember, it's dark. First watch. Sun up isn't there yet. They can see inside here, and the Egyptians can see them start to move. So the Pharaoh said, get them. So they come down here with the chariots and the foot guys and everything, and they head this way, and they get right up to the edge of this wall. They still can't get through, so they follow them through, thinking it will pass. Whatever this thing is will stop eventually. The ground is dry. They get over there, and they're chasing them. They get to a point here where the weight of this water, the mass of it, finally overtakes the force of the wall of air, and it closes in. When it does, by this time, everybody's moved over here to this point. Egypt is here at the gate, and here's the shoreline, and they are caught in this onrush of water coming back to close in. As it does, exactly as it says in the Hebrew, exactly, it catches them, and before the water even gets to them, the sand, it says, under their feet congealed and then started to melt. Now, what this meant was, if you've ever been on the shore of the sea, when the wave comes in, you know how the sand melts under your feet? The hydrostatic pressure was coming back just as this wave closed, and it jammed the wheels of the chariots who were trying to turn. They were in the sand. It broke it. They couldn't get out of it. They turned and started to run in panic, and the wave closed on them and threw them up in the air and deposited all their bodies over here on this shore. It says in Hebrew. I'm telling you word for word what we found. This is pretty neat. They get over to the other side. They look back. Everybody's dead. No problem. They go over here. They take 3 days' travel down here, and the people are saying, look, have you got any fresh water? You know, we're all dying of thirst. You're taking us out in the desert to die. What are you, some kind of nut? And it translates somewhat like that. He's in real big trouble. And he's talked to God, but these people haven't. I mean, it'd be like somebody walking here trying to convince you, look, it's time for you to leave. God told me I'm going to fix it for you. You've got to convince them. You've got to see some miracles. Well, they'd seen this, and that wasn't enough. They needed the water. So Moses says to a couple of guys, he says, see this big salt lake here? Brine water that you can't drink? Go over and get that tree over there, that special tree, cut it, and throw it into the middle of it, and it will become fresh water. Sounds a bit like magic, doesn't it? We got the maps of the area. In fact, the military maps, which are much more definitive. I wanted to know how such a thing is possible within the physics as I understand it. Not that I would dispute it, I just wanted to understand how you could do that to water that's brine water. It'd be a great thing for today. On the maps that we found contour maps and underground wadi maps and seasonal maps, and here's the crossing point back up here somewhere. And they'd march down here, and here was the Marah, the bitter water pond. And here was Moses and these guys with the log, and they throw it into this. Well, here, in dotted lines and stuff, they show a seasonal flow of snow melt off of these mountains on the Sinai Peninsula down into this sand. So what had happened is the snow and the fresh water from here had melted and some fresh water came down from here and went into the sand bed and down underneath these tidal pools that came over the top and welled up underneath it as fresh water underneath the salt water and brine water. This is an inversion layer. Salt water is heavier than fresh water and wants to sink. But because it had been crusted over, it didn't allow it to happen. So he throws a big heavy log in the middle of it. Wham! What happens? If you look at it in cross-section like this, the log goes crack, breaks that layer up there. We have fresh water down here. We have heavy salt water up there, nearly 3 times as heavy if it's got a lot of metal salts in it. And this falls, the log comes in here and cracks this and goes down like this. And as this caves in and starts to fall down like this, it pushes the fresh water up to the top, and voila, fresh water. Still a miracle. But it works. And it's all there in the Hebrew. We get into a lot more interesting things the more we go into it as far as the power of the Ark of the Covenant. The real function of it. Was it just a religious artifact, or did it have real grunt to it? And it does, and did. I spend a fair amount of my own time, my fun time, chasing the location today of that Ark of the Covenant. And why? Well, I like the Indiana Jones movies. I wasn't too fond of the spiders and the scorpions that we met over there, or the bats, dirty animals. But more importantly, for some reason, Dr. Jones, myself, and a few other people have found ourselves in a situation where we have solved some codes to a very old treasure map. It's stamped in copper, and it's owned by King Hussein of Jordan. And rightly so, because it was found in Jordan when the West Bank belonged to them, so it should have been returned to them. And it gives a clue which ties in with a clue written in the Hebrew in the book of Jeremiah about where and who it was that hid the Ark of the Covenant a long time ago to keep it safe until it would be needed again, which is now. Whoever owns the Ark of the Covenant and a little jar of ashes called a khalil, the ashes of the red heifer, in that area there, the local Arab sheikhs even agree to this. Whoever has that, Israeli or Arab, has the title deed right to the land of Israel. There will be no dispute among the Orthodox. Among those that don't care one hoot about it one way or the other, they just want the land, there's going to be a war. So among those people who are gaining power in both sides, who are fundamentalists in both sects, but are still sons of Abraham, which is Jews and Muslims alike, or Arabs alike, if they can find this instrument, then they can effect a solution temporarily to the peace in the Middle East, and we can all breathe a sigh of relief. It won't happen that way, but that's the way it's read. It has made those of us who have the two locations, we had to divide two locations. They were 90 kilometers apart down the Jordan to figure out which location it was in. Now, Dr. Jones has been digging in it for off and on for 15 years. At this very moment, we have 35 diggers going hammer and tong at it. They'll be going to dinner in about 5 hours down to Kibbutz Kalia. I'll show you that. I've got a quick video. You can see the cave we're digging at the moment. That is real fun. This device, when it works, communicates straight into wherever God lives. The Bible, the New Testament, in the book of the Revelation, they make one little reference, and it says, and the Ark of the Covenant that is in God's place did such and such. It's a communicating device. We found evidence of it in the Genesis account. It was a communicating device that communicated not only words, light, sound, but power, energy, matter. If I tell you where we think it really is at the moment, I also tell some people that I don't want to know where it is. So that's the only reason I'm not going to tell you the location at the moment. I feel it would be irresponsible. But suffice it to say this. I will show you the technique that we use to solve the coding that has been in the hands of everyone, both sides, for over 35 years, and they tossed it away as a useless document until 2 years ago. Vermes, V-E-R-M-E-S, is the leading expert, the archaeologist. I'm not an archaeologist, I'm just one of the troops, but he's the guy's books I read to kind of catch up on what the feeling was. There was a copper scroll, 12 sheets long, metal copper, that had been engraved in Hebrew by 5 different handwritings. We've had it analyzed in Texas at the university. And you can see it's quite obvious, but there were 5 different people writing this. The first one writes in Hebrew the equivalent of something like, they're almost here, the Romans are about to get us, so we have to write this in haste. Now this is in haste on a copper scroll. It has to be laid on a lambskin and laid on stone or wood under that, and each letter has to be gone like that. And this is the first guy who's writing in haste. And then there's guy number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, to do what? To tell the secret locations of the entire national treasury of Israel, and gold and silver and this and that. No mention made, obviously, of the temple artifacts and the Ark of the Covenant, however. And so the majority of serious investigators looked at it and said, look, this couldn't be true. And I read the first treasure location that they put in there, and I thought, well, look, the Romans are upon us right now. I mean, within a week or a day or something, they're going to come and rob me and kill me, and I'm writing down the secret treasure map that they're going to find after they kill me here in my cave. No. What if they catch me before I do it? I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't just write it obviously like that, would I? And then we found that they'd rolled up this copper scroll into a clay container, and they'd taken liquid clay and poured it in between all the turns to cushion it so that it would be sealed and safe for hundreds of years. Then they buried it in cave number 3. It was the 15th scroll dug out of cave number 3, 3Q15. The first place that they listed a couple of pots or jars of these talents of silver and gold was down in where we've fairly well established down the Dead Sea on the edge of it on the Israeli side, where Sodom and Gomorrah was. And we've found a whole series of stone buildings that are the stone is like tissue paper with big wads of pure sulfur. You can see it. It is leaching out of it, where the burning sulfur burned into it, and it was over 2,000 degrees centigrade to have burned the stone this way. And that was the area they said, go look for the first bit of Israel's national treasure. And if I'd have been a Roman soldier and got my Hebrew guy to translate that, I'd have probably marched off down into it. And in the region, that's on the edge of the thing called in Hebrew the area or the wilderness of Sin, T-S-I-N. In essence, they said, here, go look for this treasure. The writer of the scroll, he said, go look for this treasure in this first place. In essence, you go to hell, because that's hot and terrible and badlands and everything. And it was a little bit of a joke they had. And I looked at it and I thought, well, that was a joke, but now then what's the secret? I mean, if you were a high priest in generations to come, if they ever had another one again, how would you read this? What would you know? What would be trustworthy? What information here would survive all this time? Why did they pour liquid clay in there to keep it from denting or breaking? I guess so that the thing wouldn't be crushed and you would lose letters. I took about 2 months of fiddling around and thinking about it while I was having a meal or wandering and driving down the street or whatever, doing other things. And one day, it dawned on me. We have all the tracings and even the little scratch marks of it, even though they're locked up, like King was saying. The original French scholars preserved the photographs. They cut the scroll in sections. And this would be like one of the sections of it. It's a little bit thinner than this. They cut them in 3 sections. And the Hebrew letters were there along the thing. You'd see them kind of going, and some of them would be letters that would go up like this, that normally would only be this tall, but they're that tall. And there'd be scratch marks and things on here and holes and writing across it. But one of them that I looked at on an end-on shot showed the raising of the letters. You know, where the guy hit it and the hammer indented it. And I looked at the roll print or the tracing of this, and like some of the letters, let's say it was like the aleph here, in one place it would be thin like that, in another place it would be kind of fat and fuzzy, as though it were either deeper or shallower than the other. And I remember one of the old rabbis telling me, he said, when you find it, we will know if it's the real thing, because on the lip of the Khalil and on some of the other artifacts, there is a clay seal and the ring of the high priest we have. And he has to roll the ring around to put a special mark in it. And then I remembered, of course, it was common in the Mesopotamian Valley, in Babylon, it was common in Egypt to take a round stone and to roll it in wet clay, and it was like a printing press. What happens, I said, if we use the computer and we scan all this, and we take out all the fuzzies and put them into one group, leave them where they are on the page, but take them out, and we take out all the skinnies and put them out. I guess we better deal with all these stray scratch marks, too. On one of the sheets, this is what came out. And this is also what the area looks like where we're going. Here's a couple of scratch marks. And one letter that was exaggerated by about, 6 times its normal height. Doesn't look like much, does it? On this document in the letters we lifted out, it told about where you're supposed to go. To the Wadi HaKippah, to the river, to the twin columns, and to the cave, and so many steps inside. These two mountains and this river we have identified. They drew a map in amongst all the stuff as though it were spurious, accidental stuff. They put several handwritings in so it looked like it happened over a long period of time. They put obvious treasures in it, so if it was discovered, you go look and say, oh, someone's been here before, too bad, throw it away. I promise you though, now, in the last 2 years, everyone has realized there's pay dirt there somewhere. Well, we solved it, and I'm convinced in my own mind we know where it is and we know who put it there. And I tell you this, it wasn't Israel. It was Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. He did it when he took over Israel in the 680s BC. A most unusual alliance between him and the prophet Jeremiah. I can only tell you that much, and then I will tell you at some future date, hopefully very soon, what the rest of it is. I'm busting to tell you, but it's just not good. We had a number of problems, I must tell you. We had to pretend like we are actually going to move that rock and it's going to be there. What do you do when you see the Ark of the Covenant and you're face to face with the Creator's box? Is it still active? Will it be active if you touch it? Is it like the legends that were, or the stories that were in the Old Testament? Will 50,000 people die just looking at it? I could live with that, so to speak. If all that passes, and as the writings say, it will not be active until Israel returns to its God, and it will fire up, and the Shekinah and the column of fire will appear. If this is the way it runs, we said, okay, let's assume it's inactive when we find it. So I said to the rabbis we were talking to, what would happen to the very Orthodox community if we actually saw it being goy, not properly Jewish? Some of us have got Jewish bloodlines, but none of us were like kosher Jewish. And certainly even if you weren't a highly qualified person in their religious system, for you to look on this is a sentence of death. They have to kill you. And I said, can we come to an arrangement? And he said, oh, I'm sure we could make up some. He says, but A, no photographs. B, you don't touch it. You don't move a thing. And obviously you don't give it to anybody else but Israel. And then you get permission to do it. So there are a couple of other minor contingencies to take care of. So with that agreement, we find that if we do find it, at least we won't get zapped for finding it. And we're quite looking forward to moving this great white stone someday soon. But that's what you find by studying Hebrew. I guess that's the reward for looking, just looking, trying to be objective about it. What does this have to do with UFOs? Nostradamus warned in a tape which we have here, which we can look at it later or after question time. He said, I've typed it out here, he talked about a great Persian leader, an Antichrist, coming up and arming against the Roman Catholic Vatican City and destroying it, and all of her children, all the Christian nations to the west. Now, I don't care whether you believe Nostradamus or not. I compared his prophecy to the biblical prophecies, and where I found agreements between the two, I knew that there must be something there. One of the things they both agree on is that all of the nations of Christian and unbelievers, according to the Koran, will quake in fear when this Antichrist takes over Persia, or leads it, sorry. We have a number of tapes, or a number of spots on the tape, where the prophecies of Nostradamus were analyzed by a team here in Australia, put to the networks here in the form of Nostradamus 1989 or 87 with John Waters hosting it. And I was absolutely astounded when I looked through it to see how many parallels there were. And one of them said this: in the 10th century, or the 10th grouping of 100 quatrains of Nostradamus, in the 72nd quatrain, it speaks about the king of Terra descending from the heavens and raising to life the king of either the Mongols, it's a code, it's an anagram, or the king of the Anglos. I'm not sure which it is or if we've got it correct, but it does say that the king of Terra descends from the skies. I think it's much like the television series V, where humans appeared to come in their spaceships. We mean you no harm. Their eyes were maybe a little more sensitive to light than ours, and in the end of the series you find out that they've got reptilian bodies underneath and that they eat humans. And the only thing that kills them, surprise, surprise, is a form of dried human blood dust that is sprayed on them, and the sprinkling of this red dust blood kills the serpent. You can see the symbolism that is woven through this by the authors. But I see it as more. I see it as someone else, a group of someone else, that have said, look, what is going on? Is it like the writings say that there will be a deceptive group arrive first from off the planet, and then the good guys arrive, and those of us that are still surviving and alive and have agreed not to be part of the evil system will be rescued and go into the golden age? That's the way I see it. Could be wrong. If I'm wrong, I'll be right here with the rest of you, whatever does eventuate. But that is how I spend a lot of my time now, trying to put the pieces together. I am convinced, as you must be if you think at all, that there is something to the seers, no matter who they are, who can see into the future. If they, us, in our very diminutive position in the universe, are somehow allowed to gaze into the future, there is a reason for it. It is to, for one thing, tell you there is something in control, obviously intelligent, that is saying to you, this will happen, but do not dismay. If you are of the right mind, you will be here with me. If you are not, you will be with that group. And strange as it may sound, the Earth will continue for quite a while after this event happens in the next decade or two, if we understand it correctly. The people who are not of the good side, if you wish, who in their ignorance or otherwise join with the imposter government that arrives on the planet shortly, these people, along with these bad beings arriving, the fallen sons of God, if you wish, will eventually be locked up in a bottomless pit in Greek, or in English. In the original languages, it's more like the inside of a hollow ball. And it also speaks in the same book, in the Revelation, about an army of beings coming up out of a hole opened up in the earth itself, from inside of it. I can say no more than that because I know no more. But I think there are a lot of things that we have left to discover in this area. I think it is tantamount that we try to put these pieces of the puzzle together. There are too many Christians, there are too many Jews, there are too many Arabs, there are too many Asians who are, and American Indians who are saying that something is about to happen that is prophetic. That deity, whatever you call him, has announced to you early, not has caused, because we've caused it, we've done the game. Now, in summary, before we can go to questions, my overview of what has happened for the entire Earth for our existence is this. Right or wrong, this is the way I see it today. At least 8, 9, 10,000 years ago, there was intelligent beings all through the universe, at least in the dimension of it that we are able to see with our telescopes. And these beings were in accord with one leader, the Creator, who, according to the Hebrew text, lived on a level, an energy density, 4 to 5 levels above most of them, like dimensions, if you wish. This is what you miss in the English. This being gave all of these created beings free will, like the angels they speak of in Greek, but it's the messengers, it's the going to and from, it's the gardeners, the creators, the little guys, the sons of God that go out. The only rule was, all right, you are tied in to the consciousness of all. Let us all communicate together on a common channel. If you get hurt, if you do something, we will all know about it. Somewhere back there, the chief of all of these beings, who was the guardian of the throne of that dimension where deity lives, has always lived, this covering marshal, field marshal, chief, general, which in the Hebrew, much to your surprise I'm sure, is a cherub or a cherub, It's not a Botticelli angel with wings and a Cupid's thing. In Hebrew, it speaks of the cherub of having powers to make mountains fold up and crash into the sea when it passes. Great destructive power if needed. This is a federal marshal in the heavens, had the responsibility of guarding the throne, and he said, right, I am going to go a different way to the established order of the universe, and about a third of the beings out there agreed. Their free will right to do it. Deity has said from the start, okay guys, that's all right. You have free will. But in your free will, you are not allowed to destroy the order. So let us resolve the situation by a courtroom. And earth became the courtroom. And man became the new creation, free will being, locked into this safe area where he can't get away from for the period of the trial. During the trial, he would be, and all of us are part of that, he would be put through the test that the free will beings were out there already. Man, a certain percentage of him would go against the order. A certain percentage would stay with the order in blind faith, in believing faith. At the end, the resolution of this conflict would then show all the beings of the free will heavens out there what would have happened had the dissenters been allowed to go through the real universe out there doing their thing in opposition to the established order. Again, my opinion, based on the Hebrew things we've been able to interpret. This is coming to an end now. As a reward, all of us who are on the side that will triumph, the established order, you will be given a rank, an authority, it says, higher than even those beings that were watching the trial. You will be sitting above all of these and between them and God. And you will live forever and travel many galaxies and star systems and do things beyond our wildest dreams. In fact, it just says it is beyond your ability to understand or to accept right now. But believe it. Again, as I understand it, those who are not on the right side, who are on the rebels, don't disappear in a puff of smoke. Well, they might from where we live on the earth, but as they're conscious living entities, this life is not taken from them. They are incarcerated in a lower dimensional level called Tahom inside this bottomless pit, this inside of a hollow ball is all I can say in English. And they appear to dwell in that area at a lower energy density than the rest of the beings, but they're not dead. This is why I think the references in the English say in hell is where they live in this continual lake of fire and brimstone and whatever. Certainly, if you were to look at it from the outside, there will be a fiery border like it was at the edge of the Garden of Eden. But I think down inside of it, they'll just be confined to do their own thing and reap the rewards of being chaotic inside their own domain, as I understand it. Now, as this is Sunday, I hope you will have allowed me just this diversion into this area because this is a day I usually spend some time, if not on Saturday, to play in these areas and try to understand them. I feel it is important, though, from my viewpoint, to share with you why I think we have to be careful about this alien business, whether it is manufactured, whether it is good guys, bad guys, or whether it doesn't exist at all. Certainly, it is so topical that it is everywhere in the Western world. It is an issue and an important sociological phenomenon. We have to try to understand it. We are being herded by somebody. Now, let's get to today, these times, and talk about energy. I've got some answers for you and a lot of questions. In the Cosmic Conspiracy that most of you have, the new one, I've added about 30 or 40 pages of dissertation on primarily energy and the distribution of energy on the planet. I felt rather compelled to do this because I had been studying United Nations reports, which I'm not saying they're the absolute, but this is what is digested by most of our learned academics and our government heads and people that make decisions as to where we're going to go with energy and how we're going to run our countries. According to this report, and you'll see it in the book, it's detailed by chart, in 1997, Australia is going to run out of petroleum. Do you believe that? Out of oil. We have so much oil capped off in the West, in the deserts out there, you just would not believe it. I don't even know. It's extensive. It is so bad that the oil companies are saying, we hit oil again. In the United States, my family are in the oil business. We have an oil trust for inventions that my father's been working on for 25 years as a petroleum geologist and a solicitor to recover oil out of old oil wells. The process no point in going into it. It's rather involved a thermal process. But if you have the ground here and you have your oil well up on top and you run down here and you've blown your whole casings like this and you've got a formation and the oil has been blowing out up into your barrels of oil for your oil company for years and years, what happens is the whole pressure, the well pressure drops. There's pressure in it to start with. So when you drill it and tap it, the pressure drops and it leaves 2/3 of the oil down the ground. So you either have to pump energy down to get it out, and then you have to cost that against the cost of petroleum, or you have to figure out a clever way, which Dad has done. In the process, we surveyed the amount of oil left in the ground this way and already drilled, waiting for us. It's not whether it will work, it's the economics of it. And there's 300 billion barrels of oil that we know of positively in the United States. There. That's enough at their current consumption rate to last 60 years, 5% growth. The United States, according to the United Nations report, and you can get it, in 1998 will run out of oil. There's a little footnote at the bottom of the chart for them as well as us. This excludes strategic reserves. And what that means is they can lie. Strategic reserves are for strategy for the enemy, whoever that is. We can say we have little oil when we have heaps of it. Now, what really, really, really bothers me is why are they saying this so early, 60 years early? Why are they being dishonest? Is it because we are so slow to react as the public? Is it because we're like little children in their sight and we're not mature enough to react to save the environment? If it was 60 years away, would we get slack and say, oh, well, the next generation will do it? Do you think that's why? I don't have an answer to that. I worked very hard, so did my partner Ed, and we're still working hard at an alternate energy source I'm going to show you about right now because of our concern over the apparent shortage of energy. And not only shortage of energy, a shortage of a non-polluting, continuously renewable source of energy, an environmentally friendly and definitely interfaced harmonic source of energy. We didn't invent it, we just came along and picked up the pieces that somebody's been hiding for a long time. I hope you can figure out an answer to that, because as I say to you, I don't know why. It's in the book, I tell you their view, and I put my footnotes up at the top of the page saying, excluding the strategic oil reserves. Something big is going on. According to that report, which is a big one, the United States, South America, Europe, some other small countries involved, form a trading bloc, a consuming bloc that consumes over 85% of the energy on the planet. That's us, you know, the fat nations. Everything that we use that uses power is why we're draining it and why other people in the poorer nations aren't surviving too well. We use 85% of the resources of petroleum and a lot of the mineral resources. We have control over 28% of the oil, what they will admit to. The Arab nations, on the other hand, use 3.7% of the global consumption of energy, and they control 70% of the oil reserves and 40% of the gas, according to the United Nations report, which the Western world provided. Now, I want you to look closely at that chart in the back of the book when you get time. I put it there not to bore you, but I couldn't believe what it defined. You can make a map yourself and do it. In the nuclear energy countries, 98.5%, there's a mistake in my book, I think it said 85, there's a misprint, it's 98.5% of all the nuclear energy produced in 1989 and the production facilities were in the hands of countries who were predominantly Roman Catholic, secondarily Protestant, and a trace Jewish in some cases. No Arab countries, no Asian countries, with the exception of Turkey and Pakistan, had even had a look into anything nuclear in the most primitive way. The Western religious bloc, the Christian amalgam of some sort, and the Jewish amalgam, they stood against the Muslim group and withheld the technology. I had never thought about it until I saw the figures on paper. Now, I can understand the Arabs getting cranky. I can also understand the West saying, yeah, but never trust an Arab. This is this cultural difference from years and years and centuries of bickering. We are fighting the Crusades again, or still. The Arabs are going to take the West down. I am certain of that. Not by divine revelation as such, but by hard fact. We've been buying their oil. They take the oil dollars that we give them. They reinvest it into European countries and then into proxy companies in the United States, and they own what they need to own in the United States by proxy. During the Gulf War and during the Kuwait episode, the United States froze occasional large deposits of Arab money, which irritated the Arabs, understandably. I'm trying to tell you here from both sides, not to be an American saying the Arabs are bad, not to be an Arab saying the Yanks are the devil or whatever, but this conflict we're in the middle of. And it is going to change your lifestyle, I'm certain, and mine, drastically, very shortly. Otherwise, why would the following things have happened in the last month? In fact, before the ink was dry on my book that you've got in your hand, it started to happen. I mentioned this in the book. Why would Israel, who depends on the United States for its military and loans, why would Israel make the stupid mistake, it would appear, to go to China, to rape China, and say, we will make a deal with you to give you the phosphates, or the potash in the Dead Sea as a fertilizer in exchange for certain trade items, and we will also give you the secret to the Scud missile. Because if the United States is somebody you depend on, you do not offend them. They must think in Israel, and perhaps rightly so, the United States is no longer able to defend us adequately. It's got its own problems. We're going to have to look out after number one. And in the region, the only people that Israel could turn to with enough ground clout is a 200 or 300 million man army in China, which you probably are not aware of, but we are. In fact, there's a guy here that's in the train driving business. You may be aware of this. Is over the last few years, China, mainland China, has been building horrendous amounts, hundreds per year, almost one per day, of super locomotives where the wheels alone in the locomotive weigh 12 tons. They have built railway all through China over to the northern provinces to tie up to Iran eventually. Rail going and a rail coming for trade in the Middle East. They have enough steam, coal, recycle engines now then to ship everybody in China to the Middle East if they wanted to. Why? Israel is making a deal with a new power structure in the area. They have to have a buffer to keep the Arabs off their back and to keep the Russians off their back, what's left of Russia anyway at the moment. Now then, a new wild card is in the game. A new wild card. Azerbaijan, the areas in the south, in the Georgian province region of the old Soviet Union. They were good places to put intercontinental ballistic missiles and short-range missiles also, targeted at the west. These now belong to the Arabs. In Iran, in the southern portion of Iran, which is old Persia, where the Shiite concentration is, the small minority but very vocal Muslim group, they now, rightly so, in their opinion, have taken possession of missiles, nuclear missiles that are already targeted and can be retargeted, but they now have nuclear technology. The United States no longer has the ace. These guys can pull the trigger and so can they, but the Arabs can hide in a lot of desert before you get them. The game is changing. In the next month, I will bet you will hear about the peace negotiations being fired up again for earnest over a Middle East peace settlement. It's not just one of those things. This is the Balkan powder kegs of the world in which you live today. You've got about 10 years or less before this whole thing is probably going to wipe itself out over there. With the control that the Arab bloc has of our banking system in the West, and with the nuclear weapons, and with the energy that we need to keep our system going, the United States in particular cannot afford financially to put the capital they need into the recovery of their strategic reserves at the moment. They need a new energy source. Great. Let's say today that what I'm going to tell you in a minute, this energy source will work. You can go out and you can build millions of them. Do you know how long it'll take to build millions of them? And to educate you on how to use them safely? Too long. We haven't got that long. We're now down to the point where we've got probably what we need, but we can't use it. A lot of us are going to die at the same time. Where I live in Perth, I met a fellow who became a good friend of mine who retired from the American Navy. And when he was younger in the Navy, his job on board his particular vessel was to target Perth for secondary defense action. Should we have, in that case, a Russian attack against the United States and a nuclear attack at that, then Perth will be destroyed by nuclear attack from the United States to close out the Indian Ocean access to our ports. I can understand it. its strategy, its tactics. He wasn't too pleased with it. There's nothing you can do about it. He did come to settle in Perth, knowing that. That's our own side. When we talk on things related to old writings and prophecies and what-if scenarios, I think we'll look at several options that will make the future perhaps not as bleak. I think we will endure, or portions of our race will endure past the year 2000 for a long time. But there are things other than man-made dramas that are affecting us. Problems with the sun, problems with the core of our planet, problems with the ozone layer. And in this country, this should be near and dear to your heart. Last year, 25% increase in skin cancers. This year, 40%. My wife works for a surgeon who treats a lot of cancer. And it is absolutely astounding. If I had my way, I'd have all the children in the schools wearing A and B range ultraviolet shields on their faces with wraparounds, and the adults where possible. I wouldn't let a woman hang clothing, white clothing in particular, on the clothesline without the ultraviolet shields, cataracts in that particular case. I wouldn't send the kids out without clothing to stop it. We have a real problem in the South here where we are, which I might also comment on here. Ultraviolet is a CFC problem in the upper atmosphere. Not just CFC. You've got bromine and various other gases that are causing the so-called ozone depletion. Why is it that when the majority, the great majority of all the industrial consumption and transport manufacturing is in the Northern Hemisphere in Europe and the United States, why didn't the hole appear over them? It has never actually appeared yet. It's threatened to, but we got the hole down here. You think it all goes across the equator and harbors itself down the South Pole, and that's why we've got it? They tried to explain it away with an iceberg link, but we've got icebergs in the northern regions too. It's not totally due to CFC. Certainly that does have an effect, and you can get that by the stats. There's another problem or two.
Yeah, hi. When you started talking about China and this kind of political thing that's going on, I don't know about other people here, but that kind of worried me a lot. And you said something about Perth being nuked and all that kind of stuff, which also worried me a lot.
They're not going to do it.
After that point, I don't know if other people here felt the same way, but a lot of what you've been saying seems to me, as you said, a lot of us will die. And a lot of what you've been saying to me feels like it's almost like you're telling us that we should be prepared for this thing, and all the energy things that you've been telling us and giving us are almost to me like this is a preparation for something, which you said in the next month they're going to announce something about, deal agreements with the US and stuff. And it was frightening what you said as far as the US bombing Perth to keep certain channels open. Is this all concerned with the New World Order? And if it is concerned with the New World Order, which we've all been hearing about, is Australia's role in the future sort of an important, powerful role, or is it simply part of the US that this country is here for a certain specific strategic reason, and so lots of people...
Wait a minute, how many questions is that?
Seven, I think.
All right. I think I understand what you're saying. There's a lot of questions, some of which I'll also touch on tomorrow, but I'll answer, I think, the key issue here. You're looking at Australia, because you live here. If I could find a better place to live at the moment, I would go, if I could, personally. There is no safer place on the planet. Perth was not the only targeted Western city.
Sure.
They will probably never, ever get to use that option. If the United States falls from within, if its economic structure collapses, if its people riot across the country, which I must tell you we've all been expecting for at least 8 to 9 years. I was in the Pentagon visiting an admiral there in '83, and at that time he was telling me every time it gets hot, between May, June down to August in the United States, that they get their National Guard ready, they get their troops ready for civil disobedience because the heat seems to spark the anger the people have. And they wait. And they wait for it. And now it happened in L.A. If this does spread, I think it's 2 out of every 3 Americans has a gun, which is incredible. I don't mind having a gun, but I don't have one. But 2 out of every 3. My family lives there, my mother, my father, 2 of my sons with their children, my brother and his children, who's a doctor, and the stories I get back are absolutely terrifying. America has internal problems that's going to collapse it. Now let me ask you this. If there's no Arab attack, But America cannot support its bases, which is, it's closing down. You've noticed it's starting to pull back here. Who is going to defend Australia? England? Not Australia. I'll tell you that right now. We haven't got 2 cents to rub together. We're not going to do it. Indonesia. Now, look, if I were Indonesia, and I saw, 16 million people over a country the size of the United States, not using a lot of the land because it's inhospitable, but knowing that I've got 100 million people I can dedicate to making a temporary mountain range and changing the waterfall patterns and not worrying about what it does to the rest of the southern hemisphere, but I could remodel this country. I could make it work for my people, which are overcrowding. I'd be looking down here, and you'll notice in the Cosmic Conspiracy New version, I haven't done a complete job of it, but I've done a partial job of sitting over in China wearing the Chinese hat saying, now, what resources do we need? How do we get these things to take care of our people, our way? We become expendable. In this region, without the United States backup, we're going to have to become very closely allied with a Muslim nation, the Indonesian group. That's it, bottom line. We're already starting in my business to make negotiations up there. I deal with a lot of them.
Legend would have us stand that before the deluge, there was no such thing as rain coming down from heaven. It was all bubbling up from the fountains of the earth. Can you have any thoughts on that?
Well, sure. The rains prior to the flood, the old accounts in the Genesis account said in Hebrew that there was no rain, but that at night a mist came up from the ground and watered the land. And I have covered this in detail in the Vindicator Scrolls. In that great East African rift we just saw, that's 4,000 miles long, in the African portion of it, it was extremely hot, and a lot of this subterranean water was steaming up, boiling up, and it condenses on the slopes and as dew, but it's heavy dew, it's rain. If you've ever been in the tropics, you know that dew condensation or that it's rain, just big drops of it hit. And this watered the area in the region of the Garden of Eden, which is where the story was set. And in the other areas of the planet, there may not have been rain then either as a function of the global temperature envelope, which was 2 or 3 degrees centigrade higher on the mean than we share now. There have been excursions to slightly higher, but on the mean it was like that way back then. So I haven't had any problem with it. In fact, I was quite encouraged when we put the Garden of Eden there in the Danakil Plains, just right next to Djibouti there where all those smokers were. It used to be a very fertile plain. It's now covered with basalt overburden from various volcanoes, 12 to 15 of them we could find in the area. That has been and is continuing to be a very geologically active area. And that's what gave so much water, so much velocity to run down and split into the 3 tributaries, or 3 rivers to the right, and the other river, which is the Red Sea, and eventually the River Jordan, and down and became the Euphrates before the uplift occurred over near Syria.
I was just wondering if you said in your book that Pine Gap's a VLF station, and Tesla, that's the way Tesla transmitted electricity, captured from Earth, and I was wondering if this is causing this unusual weather phenomena that we're having. It seems to happen overseas in many places.
You mean like elf waves, somebody setting up standing stationary waves and causing changes in the weather?
Causing heat. It's it's freezing level after about 10,000 feet in the summer out in Australia. It's lower in the winter, but how does that heat get up there to cause a low? You know, this is, I've been wondering about.
Let me say this. Certainly it is possible and maybe even highly probable, but NASA and NOAA in the States themselves have a tremendous problem trying to predict the weather 4 days ahead with over 110 variables in a Cray computer, in fact, a couple of them, because we don't understand the mechanism of the planet. We're getting closer, and I'm sure about the time we think we understand it, we'll see that there's a major error there. So to say, is it weather? Is it ELF? Is it this person or that group doing it? I can't answer it. It's an entertaining thought, and certainly I would try to find more information on it if you find anything along those lines and correlate it. Certainly the weather is going to be and is beyond our control at the moment, and I think the sun is doing some very unusual things. In fact, I know, having talked to the IPS at Exmouth in West Australia last month. The ultraviolet layer or levels are fairly stable. There have been, however, increases in the solar wind over the last 2 years to 10 times its normal velocity and then back down, bringing some satellites down early. There is a very tight wavelength emission. I forget the frequency he told me, but it was an unusual spectral emission that has really gone up on the chart. Dr. Adam Trombley's group rang me from Denver, they're tied onto the network with NOAA, and they said some of their NOAA faxes or thermofax images of the spectral emissions of the sun in the last 2 years have arrived with a great big black stripe right through several bandwidths, and they were classified. And they rang to inquire why you would classify a bandwidth plot from the sun, and there was no good answer. They just simply said, well, I guess you're aware that something unusual is happening, and that was the end of the explanation. So I think probably what I can say is, yes, your suspicions are warranted, but not confirmed. We don't know.
Something that you've said, Stan, that is maybe inconsistent, but maybe you can explain it. Where we start talking about prophecies and predictions, and one starts to think, well, maybe it's all this way, and it's all true, you get to a point of fatalism where you say it's hopeless. What I do is not going to make any difference. And then on the other hand, you said that what you do as a contribution to the social good. How do you reconcile those things?
Well, obviously, I guess I don't see that there's nothing you can do. The way I understand it, for anyone to see into the future about what is going to happen and tell you about it, the Creator and his agents, his prophets, what he is saying, or what they are saying is, look, here of your own free will is what you are going to do. You're not being compelled to this future, but looking into it, you will generate this future. And even knowing what we know now, our actions will generate that future. And as I understand it, the reason for this is that we might address that future when it comes and know that there is someone in control, there is God, and that is his merit badge, his badge of authority, in that he did not bring this on you. He watched it happen. Remember, we're a courtroom drama here in the way I see it. And on page 127 of the Cosmic Conspiracy book, and in other places, I do suggest how I have related to this and joined the team that I reckon is going to endure the eternal order. When my time comes to die, I don't really panic about it. I mean, there are better ways to die than others, but I know that I will live on. I've had the near-death experience, been out of the body, and I'm quite content to go out there wherever that is, even the small trip I had, and continue there. A lot of other folks have done this too. So I don't mean to tell you it's hopeless, sit down and do nothing. I wouldn't have shown you the ID card rally march tape if that was my viewpoint. Quite the contrary. As I said to you at the start of today, I'm not the teacher and you're the students. I'm just one of you guys. I'm sharing what I found in the last year, 2, 3 years, whatever, and you found, I'm sure, a lot more. If we're going to do anything, or any of us are going to do anything to model this future or to be secure in how we're going to interface with it, other folk need to be told or shared, the information to be shared with them. And that, to me, seems to be the only logical way to do it. Otherwise, get your fishing pole and go out and just sit on the edge and wait for it. I'm not going to do that. Far from it. We wouldn't look for an Ark of the Covenant or look at energy conversion devices, things like this, and give them away if we weren't trying to interface in the way that we think the good book says to. Well, I'm sorry. If we don't get out of here, we're all going to jail tonight, I understand, so we better leave. You've been very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, man.